Well, welcome to the 700 Club, and thanks for joining us. Today we go to Ukraine. The United States, Russia, and Ukraine continue seeking a ceasefire. And many Ukrainians reject any proposal that gives up territory to Russia and rewards attacks on civilians.
Meanwhile, Moscow's relentless campaign of drone and missile strikes continues across the country of Ukraine. Chuck Holton reports from Kyiv.
Russia fired more than 5,000 drones and missiles in November, largely targeting Ukrainian civilian areas and critical infrastructure. The strikes leave neighborhoods without power, damage rail lines, and force millions to rely on generators yet again. The nightly attacks are shaping Ukrainian views toward the ongoing ceasefire negotiations, deepening fears that any deal reached abroad won't reflect the reality Ukrainians live with every day.
We just got to Odessa a few hours ago, and as soon as it got dark, the air defenses over the Black Sea started going off, and they've been firing into the air long lines of tracers. Not exactly sure what they're shooting at, but you can guess it's probably a drone incursion or something like that. You can hear the firing continuing back there behind me.
At this year's Ukrainian National Prayer Breakfast, participants joined in prayer for the war to end.
You're not forgotten. You're not forsaken.
President Volodymyr Zelensky offered a message that continues resonating as the country weighs what peace should mean.
Faith is essential for us. It is the armor for our spirit. This is a real battle between good and evil. We feel your support, your words, and especially your prayers for our people and our children. They remind us we are not alone, and that together we can stop this darkness.
If you wonder what the Russian strategy is to try to win this war, it's not to defeat Ukraine militarily. What they're trying to do by sending hundreds of missiles and drones almost every night is to just terrorize the people into submission. This apartment building behind me here in downtown Kyiv was struck at the end of July, and 37 people were killed, including 5 children. If it happened once, you could say it was an accident, but since this happens almost every night, it's hard to believe that Russia isn't doing it on purpose.
Those attacks help explain why many Ukrainians reject any proposal that freezes the conflict along the current front lines. The draft plan under discussion would leave nearly 5 million Ukrainians under Russian occupation, something much of the country considers unacceptable.
I think it's important for some Americans to understand that we are facing a very serious enemy who could threaten peace throughout the entire world. Of course, Americans are a bit far away, so they don't feel the threat as acutely. But we must still understand that we've encountered a very, very serious enemy who has absolutely no boundaries.
The battle between good and evil is still ongoing. Russia continues attacking and destroying, but we will reach peace, one that is strong and lasting. That is what our prayers are for today, and those prayers will be heard.
Although Ukrainians are exhausted from 4 years of war, they're nowhere near surrendering. Across the country, as cities rebuild power grids and communities endure nightly missile strikes, the resilience of the Ukrainian people is on full display. From Kyiv, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Well, with us now is CBN's senior international correspondent, George Thomas. He's just back from Ukraine. So, George, it's hard to believe it's been 4 years. You know, at the outset, everyone predicted, you know, the supposedly people that know about military intelligence that Ukraine wouldn't last a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month. Here we are 4 years later.
Unbelievable. Yeah, absolutely is. I mean, I spent 4 months. I was there in Ukraine shortly before the war started. I found myself in Kyiv when the bombs started dropping on February 22nd at 4 o'clock in the morning. Spent about 4 months crisscrossing the country. And as you mentioned, you know, 4 years, almost 4 years later, I mean, it's awful. About 1.2, 1.3 million people have lost their lives. Tens of thousands have been injured. I did a story just yesterday about 50,000 Ukrainian soldiers have lost limbs. It's just between 50,000 to 80,000. It's just awful. It really is, yeah.
Well, what's the goal here? What's Russia really trying to do? And Is it just about let's get a land bridge to Crimea, or is there a larger strategic plan?
Yeah. Former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said this week, he said the Trump administration is giving all the carrot to Putin and all the stick to Zelensky, when it should be the other way around. The feeling amongst the Europeans, Gordon, and the Ukrainians is that Trump approaches this conflict from a transactional standpoint. He basically says, let's do and let's give everything to the Russians so that they can accept it, but in exchange, we in essence give away Ukraine's sovereign territory, their rule over their own territory, basically give as much concessions to Vladimir Putin, with not even looking at the long-term strategic aspect of the conflict. Does the negotiation deter Russia from ever again, launching an attack against Ukraine? Is there any pressure on them militarily, economically? And the Ukrainians see this as a very one-way transaction. Let's get this war done as quickly as possible from a transactional standpoint, do whatever it takes to put on the table for the Russians to accept, and then we don't care what happens to the Ukrainians and what Zelensky accepts or doesn't accept.
Well, what's the reason for it? I mean, is the reason just the nuclear stockpile that Russia has? Is it trying to avoid World War III, the devastation that is potentially could be unleashed against the whole world, but I would assume Europe would be the prime target. Yeah. So is that what's really behind the let's give them whatever it is they want so that they stand down?
I don't think this administration necessarily looks at it long term. They're just looking at it from the administration. President Trump has 3 more years, Gordon. And he came into office during the whole campaign. He says, I'm going to do this on day 1. I'm going to bring an end to this war. We're not there yet. He has 3 more years to put a seal on this and to fulfill this campaign pledge. Within the MAGA base, there is this sense that Putin is the good guy, which I really don't understand, I'm sorry, and that Zelensky is the bad guy. In fact, this week, Trump basically called Zelensky in an interview with Politico. He called Zelensky the P.T. Barnum. This guy is a huckster. He basically managed to get President Biden to give him $320 billion. And what do we have to show for it after all these years? Has accused the Ukrainian government of rampant corruption. I said there's no corruption here in the United States or any other country around the world. So there's this narrative that Ukraine is bad, Putin is good, Russia is good, and the base does peddle that. And this is what Zelensky is fighting against. I think what he has on his side today is that the Europeans are basically buffeting against the Trump administration's proposal. You know, this 28 plan that came out about 2 weeks ago, that basically, the controversy was that, was this 28 plan written by Moscow? Because Moscow completely agreed to everything. And it, in essence, really put a danger to Ukraine's territorial integrity. So that's, again, it's part of that narrative that continues to flow within the mainstream media and within the MAGA base. Well, I
think the MAGA base is fractured on it. I think there's support for Ukraine within that base. And this could be an issue that literally divides that. Sure. And, just politically, looking at the midterms, if it's viewed that there's capitulation to Russia, I don't think that that's going to play well with the American people. Yeah. I'll give you a parallel that, the Obama administration ran on, we will get out of Afghanistan and we will get out of Iraq. They didn't get out. They left that to Biden. They did get out of Iraq and pulled the troops out, and in the vacuum, ISIS came up. Yep. We saw what happened under the Biden administration with the pullout from Afghanistan. It was a national disgrace. Are we at risk of that just to say, let's not have World War III? Are we actually fueling Russian aggression? And I'll add another point. Yeah. The Russian foreign minister last week said the U.S. is our adversary. They're not thinking Ukraine. They're thinking globally. So shouldn't we be thinking globally?
Well, there's something within the narrative of this administration that wants to continue coddling the Kremlin on this very issue, when in fact, if the analysts say if we're able to stand absolutely with a straight backbone and a spine to serve notice to Putin to bring an end to this, put the squeeze of the economic sanctions. This is what Zelensky is so afraid of, that in this enormous pressure, Gordon, that he is facing from the Trump administration, that, you know, he came back just last week, says, I am not going to give up my territory. And if you look at a map right here of Ukraine, where the sticking point is that region of the Donbass region. What Vladimir Putin, he already has most of Luhansk, most of Donetsk. That's that red area. And I've been to those two cities of Kramatorsk and Slavyansk. He's basically telling the Ukrainians, hey, you know what? We've taken 11 years trying to conquer this territory. Go ahead and just give it all to us, and there will be peace. Not only that, all your troops that are there in that red area, back them up. Back them all the way up, you know. And keep in mind, Ukraine has spent the last 11 years fortifying that place. That's why it's taken the Russians, this mighty Russian army, 11 years. They've still not conquered it. So what the Russians are saying, just give us all this territory that belongs to you, give it to us. And then recognize the territories that we've already seized, and there'll be peace. And the Ukrainians are saying, yo, we had a thing called the Budapest Agreement back in the 1990s that basically said, if we give up the third largest tactical nuclear weapons that we have in possession, give it up, that the Russians, the Americans, and the English would come to our defense if any other country would attack us. Well, guess what? 20 years later, Russia attacked Ukraine. And what did the United States do? Nothing. What did the Brits do? Nothing. This plays on the Ukraine.
Obama gave him a pass.
Of course.
Yeah.
And this
there
wasn't
even an attempt.
No.
But in the aftermath of that, Ukraine absolutely, it was the largest military mobilization in history.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They now have the largest army in Europe, 800,000 strong.
Yeah.
So if the United States...
And Putin wants it to cap that at 500,000.
If the United States pulls out, will Ukraine go alone?
They wouldn't go. They need the Europeans. They need the Europeans. And we've heard rumors, you know, Macron has talked about potentially deploying troops. Germany has stepped up. There's the Europeans are basically, they're coming up with a counter-proposal to the Trump administration's 28-point peace plan, because they know it's on their border. They know it's on their border. The United States is an ocean away. They know that this is their fight, and if they give up, Putin, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but with his grand idea of a reconstituted former Soviet Union, with Ukraine being the buckle of that, being the epicenter of it, there's no guarantee that the Russians will suddenly say, you know what, there's going to be peace, let's just all sing Kumbaya, and everything's going to be okay. The Ukrainians don't believe it. Neither do the Europeans.
George obviously feels very strongly about this issue. and he spent a lot of time in Ukraine, and he really identifies with the Ukrainian people. I hope you get that spirit coming through, that they really do want to fight. They view it as their national identity at stake. And on the other side, the Russian propaganda that they're Nazis and they deserve it, and all of this has gone throughout Russia. Let's pray. There is a God, and He does care about His children. Let's pray that there would be peace, that Russia would come to its senses and say, no, we shouldn't continue this harm. The war has been absolutely horrible. And I get story after story about Ukraine, about innocent civilians, babies being killed, all of this. And let's intercede, let's pray, and let's pray for peace. Well, in other news, there may be war with Venezuela. A seizure of an oil tanker is the Trump administration's latest move against the Maduro regime. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. The tanker seizure is viewed as a major escalation. Video released by the Department of Justice shows members of the Coast Guard rappelling down to the ship from Navy helicopters. The administration says the tanker is part of a, quote, illicit shipping network supporting foreign terrorist organizations. Venezuela's government denounced the action, calling it unprecedented aggression. The United States has been carrying out controversial airstrikes against suspected drug boats from Venezuela and Venezuelan cartels in the Caribbean. The president has also threatened to conduct land strikes in Venezuela. Well, turning to Israel, a new report from Amnesty International accuses Hamas of crimes against humanity on October 7th and afterwards. The report says Palestinian terrorists killed innocent civilians, presenting evidence of physical and sexual violence against hostages. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is considering terrorism-related sanctions against UNRWA, the relief agency for Palestinians. A senior State Department official calling the UN agency, quote, corrupt, with a track record of aiding and abetting terrorists. Gordon?
They ought to go even further and call it a terrorist organization, because clearly they aided October 7th. Clearly they used UN buildings to hide Hamas fighters. Clearly they put that in classrooms, hospitals. They were part of the whole human shield strategy. They're part of the propaganda machine that teaches little children to hate and kill Jews. UNRWA needs to go away and no longer exist. It has been a blight on the reputation of the UN, a blight on the reputation of the United States. We've been a primary funder of that organization for decades. And my hope, my prayer is that would finally stop.